golden palace shimmered under the twin suns of Zerathia, its spires reaching toward the heavens like fingers of fire. Inside, the air was thick with an otherworldly energy, a mix of metallic scents and something floral that seemed to hum faintly in the background. Captain Elias Drake, a human soldier from Earth's interstellar fleet, found himself standing alone in one of the grand halls, his boots clicking against polished floors made of some material he couldn't identify, something smoother than marble but warmer than glass. He had been sent on what was supposed to be a routine reconnaissance mission to this alien planet. But routine missions rarely stayed that way when it came to first contact scenarios. Now here he was, unarmed except for his wits, surrounded by towering guards who looked more machine than creature, their bodies encased in gleaming armor etched with intricate patterns that pulsed faintly with light. The Queen's summons had come unexpectedly, delivered through glowing glyphs projected onto the wall of his holding cell. A message neither spoken nor written, yet somehow understood. Elias adjusted the collar of his uniform, feeling every ounce of tension coiled within him. He wasn't afraid, not exactly. But there was something unsettling about being summoned to meet the ruler of an entire species, especially one as enigmatic as the Zerathians. Their technology surpassed anything humanity had ever seen, and their culture remained shrouded in mystery despite decades of cautious observation from afar. They were rumored to value beauty above all else, though no one knew quite what form that beauty took or how they measured it. As he walked alongside the silent guards, Elias couldn't help but marvel at the opulence around him. The walls were lined with massive murals depicting scenes of cosmic battles and celestial wonders, each painted in colors so vivid they almost seemed alive. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting beams of golden light across the room, illuminating statues carved from crystal-like substances that refracted rainbows onto the floor. It felt surreal, like stepping into a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. And then, suddenly, the procession stopped. A pair of massive doors swung open before them, revealing a throne room bathed in soft, golden light. At the far end sat the Queen herself, her presence commanding even before she spoke. Her skin glowed faintly, shifting hues between deep indigo and radiant silver, and her eyes, those piercing, multifaceted orbs, seemed to pierce straight through him. She wore robes adorned with gemstones that caught the light in impossible ways, making her appear both regal and otherworldly. "Well," she said, her voice echoing throughout the chamber, resonant yet melodic. "Do you think I am beautiful, human?" For a moment, Elias forgot how to breathe. This wasn't just a question. It was a challenge, a gauntlet thrown down in front of him. He glanced nervously at the guards flanking him, their weapons trained subtly but unmistakably on him. One wrong word, and he might never leave this place alive. Elias stammered, his mind racing. How did one answer such a loaded question, especially when posed by someone or something as breathtakingly strange as the alien queen sitting before him? His gaze darted around the vast throne room, searching for inspiration, or maybe just a distraction. The walls were covered in intricate mosaics depicting stars colliding and galaxies swirling together, while floating orbs of light hovered lazily overhead, casting everything in a warm, ethereal glow. None of it helped calm his nerves. "You hesitate," the Queen observed, leaning forward slightly. Her movements were fluid, almost hypnotic, and her expression unreadable beneath layers of shimmering adornments. "Is my appearance so confounding to your primitive sensibilities?" "No," Elias blurted out, perhaps too quickly. "I mean, yes. Wait. No, I mean—" He groaned inwardly, realizing he was digging himself deeper into a hole. Taking a deep breath, he tried again. "Your Majesty, forgive me if I seem uncertain. It's not every day I find myself face to face with, well, someone like you." The Queen raised an eyebrow, or at least what passed for an eyebrow among her kind. It was hard to tell, given her features were so unlike anything human. Instead of hair, she had what appeared to be flowing tendrils of light cascading down her back, shifting colors in response to her mood. Right now, they flickered between icy blue and fiery orange, suggesting either irritation or amusement, or possibly both. "Ah," she said, tilting her head slightly. "So you admit I am extraordinary?" "Well, yeah," Elias replied, finding some semblance of confidence. "You're definitely unique, striking, and let's be honest, your palace makes Versailles look like a toolshed." He gestured vaguely at the ornate surroundings, hoping humor would break the tension. To his surprise, the Queen chuckled, a sound like wind chimes ringing in a gentle breeze. "Unique, striking. These are acceptable descriptors, I suppose, but do they equate to beauty in your limited vocabulary? Elias hesitated again, aware that his life might literally depend on his next words. Beauty's complicated, he ventured cautiously. It's not just about looks, it's about presence, charisma, the way someone carries themselves. By that measure, he paused, meeting her gaze directly this time. You're pretty damn impressive. Her lips curved into what could only be described as a smirk, though it transformed her face in ways Elias couldn't fully comprehend. For a moment she seemed almost human, or at least relatable. Then the smirk faded, replaced by a more serious expression. And yet, she said softly, rising gracefully from her throne, you remain cornered against my wall, trembling like prey before a predator. Tell me, human, does fear diminish beauty, or enhance it? Before Elias could respond, the ground beneath him trembled slightly, and the guards shifted closer, their weapons humming ominously. He swallowed hard, acutely aware of just how precarious his position truly was. Elias felt the cold stone of the palace wall pressing into his back, a stark contrast to the heat radiating off the queen as she advanced toward him. Each step she took seemed deliberate, calculated, her luminous form casting shifting shadows across the golden floor. Her very presence exuded power, yet there was something else, something softer, almost vulnerable, hidden beneath the layers of regality. It unnerved him more than any weapon ever could. Fear doesn't diminish beauty, Elias replied carefully, his voice steadier than he expected. But it changes how we see it. Fear sharpens our focus, makes us notice things we'd otherwise overlook. He forced himself to hold her gaze, though his instincts screamed at him to look away. Right now, I'm noticing a lot about you. Her steps slowed, and for a fleeting moment, her luminescent skin dimmed slightly, as if she were taken aback by his words. Then, just as quickly, her composure returned, and she tilted her head curiously. Such boldness, she murmured, circling him now like a predator sizing up its quarry. You humans are peculiar creatures, so fragile, yet so defiant in the face of oblivion. Elias clenched his fists behind his back, resisting the urge to fidget. Defiant is one way to put it. Desperate might be another. She stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could feel the faint warmth emanating from her body, or whatever passed for a body among her kind. Her multifaceted eyes locked onto his, and he felt as though she were peeling back layers of his soul, dissecting every thought, every emotion. Desperation has its own allure, she said, her tone contemplative. It speaks of survival, of determination, traits I admire. There was a pause, heavy and charged, as if the air itself held its breath. Then, without warning, she reached out, her hand hovering inches from his face. Her fingers, long, slender, and tipped with faintly glowing nails, stopped just short of touching him. Elias froze, unsure whether to flinch or lean into the gesture. Tell me, human, she whispered, her voice dropping to a near purr. If I were to touch you, would you recoil? Or would you dare to meet my touch with yours? His heart pounded in his chest, a mix of adrenaline and something else he couldn't quite name. Was it fear? Curiosity? Something deeper? Before he could decide, one of the guards stepped forward abruptly, breaking the spell. The queen turned sharply, her glowing tendrils flaring bright red for a split second before calming once more. What is it? She demanded, her voice sharp and commanding. The guard bowed low, speaking in a series of clicks and whistles that Elias couldn't understand. Whatever it was, it clearly displeased her. Her expression darkened, and she let out a frustrated sigh. Turning back to Elias, she gave him a long, appraising look. We will continue this conversation later, she said firmly. For now, you are dismissed. Dismissed, but not free. As two guards escorted him from the throne room, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that he'd narrowly avoided disaster, and perhaps stumbled into something far more complex than he'd anticipated. Later that evening, Elias found himself pacing inside a lavishly appointed chamber that had been designated as his quarters. The room was filled with furnishings that seemed designed to intimidate rather than comfort. Chairs too tall to sit in comfortably, tables supported by clawed feet, and tapestries depicting scenes of conquest and dominance. Despite the luxury, he felt like a prisoner, albeit one housed in a gilded cage. A knock at the door startled him, and before he could respond, it slid open to reveal a servant, an insectoid creature with iridescent wings and 6 delicate limbs. It carried a tray laden with food and drink, placing it gently on the table before bowing deeply and retreating without a word. Elias eyed the spread warily. The dishes were unrecognizable, some steaming with fragrant vapors, others shimmering faintly in the low light. Hunger won out over caution, and he sampled a few bites, surprised to find them surprisingly palatable, if not entirely familiar. As he ate, his thoughts kept drifting back to the queen. There was something about her that gnawed at him, something beyond her obvious power and beauty. She was unpredictable, mercurial, yet there were moments when she seemed almost curious. About him, about humanity, about beauty itself. He wondered if she truly understood the weight of the questions she asked, or if she even cared about the answers. His musings were interrupted by another knock, louder this time. Without waiting for permission, the door opened again, and in strode the queen herself, resplendent in a gown that seemed woven from starlight. Her arrival silenced every other thought in his mind. "You eat heartily for a man who may not live to see tomorrow," she remarked, her tone teasing yet edged with seriousness. Elias stood quickly, nearly knocking over the chair behind him. "I figured if I'm going to die, I might as well enjoy my last meal." She chuckled, the sound sending a strange warmth through him. "Such pragmatism. You humans are endlessly fascinating." She moved closer, her presence filling the room like a storm cloud tinged with sunlight. "I have questions for you, human. Questions that require honesty, not flattery." He nodded, trying to keep his composure. "Ask away, your majesty. I'll answer as best I can." Her glowing tendrils swayed gently, as if responding to her mood. "Why do your people fight wars? What drives you to destroy each other so recklessly?" Elias hesitated, caught off guard by the depth of her inquiry. "It's complicated," he began slowly. "Sometimes it's about resources, sometimes ideology. Other times, fear. Fear of losing control, of being weaker, of becoming irrelevant." "And love?" she pressed, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Does love drive your wars as well?" He blinked, taken aback. "Not usually. Love tends to make people want to protect, not destroy. Yet you fight for those you love, do you not?" She countered, taking another step closer. "You sacrifice, you bleed, you kill. All in the name of preserving what matters most to you." Elias swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words settle over him. Yeah, I guess we do." The queen studied him intently, her expression unreadable. "And tell me, human, what do you love most?" The question hit him like a punch to the gut. He thought of Earth, of the green fields and endless skies, of the friends and comrades he'd left behind, of the simple joys he'd taken for granted until now. "Home," he said finally. "I miss home." To his surprise, her demeanor softened, the edges of her angular features smoothing slightly. "Home," she repeated as if tasting the word. "An interesting concept, fragile yet enduring, like beauty itself." They fell into silence, the air between them crackling with unspoken tension. For the first time since arriving on Zarathia, Elias felt a flicker of connection, a spark of understanding that transcended species and worlds. Days passed in a blur of uncertainty and intrigue. Elias spent much of his time confined to the palace, occasionally permitted to wander its sprawling gardens or explore its labyrinthine corridors under the watchful eyes of the queen's guards. These excursions became less about freedom and more about observation, as he began to notice subtle details about the Zarathian way of life that fascinated him. The gardens, for instance, were unlike anything he'd ever seen. Plants grew in impossible shapes, their leaves shimmering with bioluminescent hues that changed depending on the time of day, or perhaps the mood of whoever tended them. Strange creatures flitted between the foliage, some resembling birds, others defying classification altogether. Once, while walking along a crystalline pathway, Elias spotted a small, lizard-like being perched atop a flower, staring at him with wide, curious eyes. When he approached, it chirped melodically and scampered away, leaving behind a trail of glittering dust. Inside the palace, he discovered hidden courtyards where musicians played instruments that emitted notes both haunting and beautiful. The melodies seemed to resonate through the very walls, vibrating in harmony with the ambient hum of the structure itself. On one occasion, he stumbled upon a group of artisans crafting sculptures from materials that appeared liquid until touched, solidifying instantly into intricate forms. Their work was mesmerizing, each piece imbued with movement and life. Through it all, the queen remained an enigma, appearing sporadically to engage him in conversations that ranged from philosophical debates to playful banter. She questioned him relentlessly about Earth, probing for insights into human nature, culture, and emotions. In turn, she shared fragments of her own history, hinting at ancient traditions and customs that shaped her people's obsession with beauty. Yet for every answer she provided, 10 new questions arose, drawing Elias deeper into her orbit. One evening, as they strolled through a mirrored hall where reflections danced across infinite surfaces, the queen stopped abruptly and turned to face him. "You've been here long enough to learn much about us," she said, her voice carrying a note of challenge. "But have you learned anything about yourself?" Caught off guard, Elias hesitated. "I've learned I'm adaptable," he replied after a moment, "that I can survive, even thrive, in situations I never imagined possible." She smiled faintly, her glowing tendrils swaying gently. "Adaptability is survival, but thriving requires something more: passion, purpose." She paused, studying him intently. "What purpose drives you, human?" He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, unsure how to articulate the jumble of thoughts swirling in his mind. Purpose had always been clear to him before: duty, loyalty, the mission. But here, surrounded by alien wonders and confronted by this extraordinary being, those certainties felt shaky, incomplete. "I don't know," he admitted finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe I'm still figuring it out." For once, the queen didn't press further. Instead, she simply nodded and continued walking, leaving Elias to ponder her words and his own. Despite the growing rapport between them, danger lurked ever-present in the Golden Palace. The queen's court was rife with intrigue, factions vying for influence and whispers of rebellion echoing through shadowy corridors. Some viewed Elias as a threat, a foreign element destabilizing the delicate balance of power. Others saw him as a pawn to be manipulated, a means to curry favor with the queen or undermine her. One night, as Elias slept fitfully in his quarters, a sudden commotion jolted him awake. The door burst open, and several armed guards stormed in, their weapons trained on him. Before he could react, they seized him roughly, dragging him out into the hallway. Panic surged through him as he struggled against their grip, but resistance proved futile against their mechanical strength. He was brought before a council chamber, where a group of high-ranking officials awaited, their faces stern and unyielding. The queen sat at the head of the table, her expression unreadable as she watched the scene unfold. One of the officials, a towering figure clad in crimson armor, stepped forward, addressing her directly. "Your Majesty," he declared, his voice dripping with disdain. "This human is a liability. His presence undermines our sovereignty and risks exposing our secrets to outsiders. He must be dealt with accordingly." Elias's heart sank as realization dawned. This wasn't just a trial, it was a judgment, and the verdict was unlikely to be in his favor. The queen rose slowly, her glowing tendrils flaring brightly as she surveyed the room. "Dealt with how, Counselor Vorth?" she asked coolly, her tone laced with steel. "Shall we execute him? Exile him? Or perhaps lock him away indefinitely, feeding him scraps of information to satisfy your paranoia?" Vorth bristled visibly but maintained his composure. "The safety of Zarathia must come first, Your Majesty. Surely you see the risk he poses." "Oh, I see many things," she replied, her voice cutting like a blade, "including the fear that clouds your judgment. You mistake caution for wisdom, tradition for progress." She turned her gaze to Elias, who stood frozen, his fate hanging precariously in the balance. "This human has shown courage, intelligence, and adaptability, qualities we should embrace, not extinguish." Murmurs rippled through the chamber, some voices supportive, others dissenting. The tension was palpable, a powder keg waiting to ignite. Elias clenched his fists, knowing full well that his survival depended not just on the queen's favor, but also on navigating the treacherous waters of Zarathian politics. Just when it seemed the situation might spiral out of control, the queen raised a hand, silencing the room with a single gesture. "Enough," she commanded, her voice resonating with authority. "The human stays for now, but mark my words. Any further attempts to harm him will be seen as acts of treason against the crown." Her declaration sent shockwaves through the assembly, alliances shifting subtly as each official weighed the implications. For Elias, it was both a reprieve and a warning. The game had only just begun, and the stakes were higher than ever. In the days following the council's tense confrontation, Elias found himself drawn into a web of political maneuvering that made his military training seem laughably inadequate. The Queen, for her part, seemed determined to shield him from outright hostility, assigning him tasks that kept him visible yet ostensibly neutral. He was invited to observe court proceedings, assist in diplomatic negotiations, and even participate in ceremonial events, all under the guise of cultural exchange. Yet beneath the surface, tensions simmered, ready to boil over at the slightest provocation. One afternoon, as Elias accompanied the Queen during a tour of the palace archives, they encountered Councillor Vorth once again. The towering figure greeted them with a curt nod, his crimson armor gleaming ominously in the dim light. "Your Majesty," he intoned formally, though his gaze lingered pointedly on Elias. "I trust you are finding the archives enlightening." "They are indeed fascinating," the Queen replied smoothly, her tone betraying nothing of her true feelings, "though perhaps not as enlightening as observing the machinations of certain members of my court." Vorth stiffened, his jaw tightening imperceptibly. "Machinations, Your Majesty? Surely you jest. My sole concern is the welfare of Zarathia." "Of course," she said, her lips curling into a faint smile, "as is mine, which is why I appreciate having diverse perspectives to guide me, including those from beyond our borders." She gestured subtly toward Elias, who stood awkwardly beside her, unsure whether to speak or remain silent. The counselor's eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, Elias thought he detected a flicker of genuine anger beneath the polished facade. "Diversity is valuable," Vorth conceded grudgingly, "but only when tempered by prudence. Not every foreign influence serves our interests. Nor does every tradition." The Queen shot back, her voice sharpening slightly. "Progress requires risk, Counselor, something you seem reluctant to embrace." Their verbal sparring continued for several minutes, each side trading barbs with increasing intensity. Elias listened intently, marveling at the Queen's ability to maintain control while subtly undermining her opponent's arguments. It was a masterclass in diplomacy and manipulation. When the exchange finally ended, Vorth bowed stiffly and departed, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with unresolved tension. Once he was gone, the Queen let out a weary sigh, her shoulders sagging slightly. "Politics," she muttered, shaking her head. "A necessary evil, but an exhausting one." Elias dared to speak up. "You handled that well. If I may ask, why do you keep me around? You must know it complicates things." She turned to face him, her expression softening. "Because complexity breeds growth, human. And because—" she hesitated, her glowing tendrils dimming momentarily. "Because I believe there is value in seeing the world through different eyes." Her words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. For the first time, Elias allowed himself to consider the possibility that her interest in him extended beyond mere curiosity, or even strategy. There was something deeper here, something neither of them fully understood yet. As weeks turned into months, Elias noticed subtle shifts in the dynamics of the palace. The Queen began involving him in increasingly sensitive matters, trusting him with insights into Zarathian governance and philosophy. Meanwhile, whispers of dissent grew louder, fueled by those who viewed his growing influence as a threat to their power. Amidst this volatile landscape, Elias and the Queen forged an unlikely bond, one built on mutual respect, and perhaps something more. One evening, as they walked together through a secluded garden illuminated by the soft glow of bioluminescent blooms, the Queen paused and turned to face him. "Tell me, human," she said quietly, her voice tinged with vulnerability, "do you regret coming here?" Elias considered the question carefully, his gaze drifting to the stars visible through gaps in the palace's domed ceiling. "Regret is a strong word," he replied finally. "This place is overwhelming, dangerous, beautiful. I wouldn't trade the experience for anything, even if it means living on borrowed time." Her multifaceted eyes searched his face, as if seeking some hidden truth. "Borrowed time," she echoed softly. "An apt description, perhaps. But tell me this. If given the choice, would you stay?" The question struck him like a thunderclap, forcing him to confront feelings he'd been avoiding. Stay? Here, in this alien world, tethered to a queen whose motives remained inscrutable? Yet as he looked at her, really looked, he saw not just power and mystery but also loneliness and longing. Feelings he recognized all too well. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice raw with honesty. "But I think I'd like to find out." For a moment, neither of them spoke, the weight of his words hanging between them like a fragile thread. Then, slowly, the queen reached out, her hand hovering near his cheek before pulling back, as if unsure of her own impulses. In the weeks following their quiet moment in the garden, Elias and the queen found themselves navigating uncharted territory, not just in their personal connection but also in the political maelstrom swirling around them. The palace buzzed with rumors of rebellion, whispers of factions plotting to overthrow her rule, and him as its perceived weakness. Yet amidst the chaos, there were moments when they allowed themselves to simply be two beings from vastly different worlds trying to understand each other. One evening, after another grueling day of council meetings and diplomatic maneuvering, the queen invited Elias to join her in the observatory tower, a place he had never seen before. As they ascended the spiraling staircase, the air grew cooler, tinged with the faint scent of ozone. When they reached the top, Elias was awestruck. The domed ceiling above them was transparent, revealing an endless expanse of stars stretching across the cosmos. Below, the city sprawled like a glittering jewel, bathed in the soft glow of Zarathia's twin moons. "This is where I come to think," she said softly, breaking the silence. "To remember why I fight for this world, and what I'm willing to sacrifice." Elias stepped closer to the edge of the platform, gazing out at the breathtaking view. "It's incredible," he murmured. "Back on Earth, we call places like this sanctuaries. Places where you can breathe without feeling crushed by everything else." She tilted her head slightly, intrigued. "Sanctuary, a fitting word." She paused, then added, almost hesitantly, "Do you feel crushed here, human?" He turned to face her, his expression thoughtful. "Sometimes, but not always. There are moments, like this one, that remind me how extraordinary all of this is. You included." For a fleeting second, her glowing tendrils shimmered brighter, betraying a flicker of emotion she couldn't or wouldn't hide. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the light dimmed again. "You flatter me," she said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "It's not flattery if it's true," Elias countered gently. "Look, I know I don't belong here. I know I'm a walking target for half your court. But none of that changes the fact that you're remarkable. And maybe, just maybe, we're not so different after all." Her gaze locked onto his, searching for something, validation, perhaps, or understanding. Whatever she found seemed to resonate deeply within her. Without warning, she reached out, her fingers brushing lightly against his arm. It was the first time she'd initiated physical contact, and the sensation sent a jolt through him, both electric and oddly comforting. "You shouldn't say such things," she whispered, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "Words have power here, human. They shape destinies." "So do actions," he replied, his own voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "And right now I'm choosing to trust you, even if it costs me everything." The weight of his declaration hung heavy in the air, neither of them daring to move or speak. For the first time, Elias saw vulnerability in her. Not the calculated kind she used to manipulate others, but raw, unfiltered honesty. It was terrifying and beautiful all at once. Their bond deepened in the days that followed, though it remained fraught with danger. Counselor Vorth and his allies redoubled their efforts to discredit Elias, spreading propaganda that painted him as a spy sent to infiltrate the palace. Public opinion began to shift, fueled by fearmongering and misinformation. Riots erupted in the lower districts of the city, demanding his expulsion or worse. The queen stood firm against the tide, defending Elias even as pressure mounted from all sides. "He stays," she declared during one particularly heated assembly, her voice ringing with authority. "Anyone who disagrees may challenge me directly." Her defiance only emboldened her enemies, however. Late one night, as Elias slept fitfully in his quarters, an explosion rocked the palace, shattering windows and sending shards of crystal raining down into the courtyard below. He bolted upright, heart pounding, as alarms blared throughout the structure. Guards burst into his room seconds later, ushering him toward safety. But instead of leading him away from the chaos, they brought him to the throne room, where the queen awaited, surrounded by smoke and debris. Her armor gleamed fiercely in the flickering emergency lights, and her eyes burned with determination. "They've made their move," she said grimly. "Vorth and his followers have seized control of the eastern wing. If we don't act now, they'll tear this palace apart." "What do you need me to do?" Elias asked without hesitation. Her lips curved into a fierce smile. "Stay alive. That's all I ask for now. What followed was a harrowing battle, one that tested every ounce of courage and ingenuity Elias possessed. Together with the queen and a small contingent of loyal guards, they fought their way through the palace's labyrinthine halls, facing ambushes, traps, and overwhelming odds. At one point, Elias found himself cornered by a group of rebel soldiers, armed with nothing but a stolen energy blade. Just as he braced for the worst, the queen appeared behind him, her presence alone enough to scatter their foes. "Still trying to play hero?" she teased, though her tone carried genuine admiration. "Someone has to keep up with you?" he shot back, grinning despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. By dawn, the rebellion had been quelled, though the cost was steep. The palace bore scars that would take years to heal, and the queen's authority had been shaken, but not broken. Standing amidst the wreckage, she addressed her people, vowing to rebuild and unite Zarathia under a new vision, one that embraced diversity, progress, and cooperation. As the dust settled, Elias realized something profound. He no longer felt like an outsider. This alien world, with all its dangers and wonders, had become his home. And the queen, no longer just a ruler or captor, had become something far more meaningful. Months passed, and their bond continued to evolve. Though they faced lingering resistance from remnants of the old guard, the queen's reforms began to take root, ushering in an era of unprecedented change. In private moments, they dared to dream of a future together, one that transcended the boundaries of species and tradition. When the queen finally knelt before him one evening, holding out a delicate circlet adorned with shimmering gemstones, Elias felt his breath catch in his throat. "This symbolizes unity," she explained, her voice trembling with emotion. "Not just between us, but between our worlds. Will you accept it?" Tears welled in his eyes as he nodded, slipping the circlet onto his finger. "Always," he whispered. Their marriage ceremony was unlike anything Elias could have imagined. A fusion of human simplicity and Zarathian grandeur, held beneath the stars in the palace gardens. As they exchanged vows, surrounded by friends, allies, and even former adversaries, Elias knew they still had challenges ahead. But for the first time, he believed they could face them together. Years later, as they watched their children, half-human, half-Zarathian hybrids, play among the bioluminescent blooms, Elias marveled at how far they'd come. Peaceful? Perhaps not entirely, but theirs was a life built on love, resilience, and hope, a testament to the beauty that could arise when two souls dared to bridge the impossible divide between worlds.